This is Marketing Jam, a podcast featuring the brightest minds in Canadian marketing.
Hey, welcome back to Marketing Jam. Shaheed Devji here, sitting in for Darian Kovacs, and really happy to be joined with Adam Mills, who is the co-founder, sales and marketing director for Four Winds Brewing.
Yes.
And so Four Winds Brewing, if you can explain to our audience what it is, the name is pretty self-evident, but why don't you explain what you do?
Sure. Well, as you said, I'm the sales and marketing director. So, I mean, among other things, I'm also kind of general management. And when you're an owner as well, you wear many hats, and we all kind of pitch in and do a lot of different things. But generally speaking, I manage the different teams, the marketing team and the sales team, and sort of the tasting room, front of house side of things. And I make sure everybody has the right tools to successfully operate and do their jobs.
Yeah. So it's fair to say Four Winds is a craft brewery?
Yes.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
How would you define a craft brewery? Because in my mind, it's small, it's intimate, it's not done in a mechanical way.
Yeah.
Is that a good description?
Yeah, that's part of it. But the size really doesn't have much to do with it. It's more about the methods and the procedures and how you treat the product and the ingredients and that kind of thing. Because you can actually get very large and still be considered a craft brewery. Like Sierra Nevada would be a good example of that. They're massive, and there's a lot of other American breweries that are really big that are still considered craft, and we look up to those guys because they've been able to grow and sustain themselves and still remain true to their craft. So yeah, it's more about practice.
So craft brewery and brewing in BC, and probably, I guess, across the world, especially specifically in North America, has grown a lot in the last 5-10 years.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, in BC, I guess we were a little bit behind what was happening in the States, and so it was probably inevitable. But I think people are just moving towards smaller batch, more artisanal type stuff. They want to kind of know where their products are coming from. They want to buy into the story and the ideology behind the brewery, and I think it works for a lot of different industries. You know, these days, people are going back to that handmade kind of thing, and I think it falls into that. And I also think that people are realizing that there are such great options out there for beer. Like, you don't have to just stick to the super thin-bodied, like clear lagers that we were used to. But yeah, I think it's a medium for like endless innovation, and it's exciting for people. There's a million different ways to manipulate beer, and I think that's part of it.
So we're a marketing show. We're at a marketing conference, CIMC 2018, and you talked about story and that being sort of a part of what people are looking for.
Yeah.
How much do you find that to be the case in your business and the customers that you talk to day to day? How much do they want to support the people behind the business and why they're doing what they're doing?
Yeah, there's probably two or more different types of consumers. Some people are just after the liquid and after the product and think it's great and don't care too much about the story, and others really care about the story. And so I think we're trying to be there for both both sides of it. So to us, the story is very important. We want to make sure our beer is at the highest standards and continually innovate and check ourselves and make sure that we're doing the best we can. But we also want to do that with our branding and our marketing and our outreach and our involvement in the community and trying to let people in on who we are. And so I think there's a balance of it. For us, we would kind of pay attention to both sides equally, I would say. Yeah.
So back in the day, Molson and Labatt were clearly competitors, right?
Yeah.
Craft breweries, are they competitors, or is there more camaraderie amongst you?
At the end of the day, there is some competition, but it's more camaraderie than anything else. We're friends with all of the other breweries, and we share ideas, we call each other, we share ingredients, and if someone's short this, we'll lend it to them, and vice versa. And there's a lot of camaraderie in that, because at the end of the day, our real competition isn't necessarily each other, because the essence of craft beer is to experiment and try different beers, and you're at a social gathering and everyone's got all these different beers and you're sharing them and trying new things. Our main competition is really the big guys, the macro breweries, because we feel as though there's so much market share to still go after and to still turn someone who's drinking mass-produced beer into a craft beer lover over time is kind of the goal. And so in that way, we're not in so much competition with each other as we are with the bigger guys.
Okay, so let's get into how we do that, right?
Yeah.
How do you stand out? How do you, as the little guy, put yourself next to the big guy and say, choose us?
It has to come down to the beer first. There's all kinds of other ways to look at it, but it's the beer has to be, in this competitive landscape, the beer has to be really, really good, or just don't even bother, I would say. I mean, there's nearly 100 breweries that have opened up in the last 5 years in BC. I think it's like 90 some odd. I can't keep track anymore. But the competition is pretty intense now. So you really got to stand out with your beer. If you're not trying to push the boundaries, if you're not trying to constantly improve, then you're going to struggle. The other side is you want to make sure your brand stands out. These days, branding is super important. Maybe 10 years ago, it wasn't as important as it is now, but things have changed a little bit. People are looking to buy into something that they like visually as well as what they like taste-wise. And so they're both important, but it's got to start with the beer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So you're talking about how to stand out. How big is the marketing team? Is it just you, or are there a couple other people?
There's a couple other people. So it's myself, and then we have our in-house graphic designer, who's our social media manager. Day in, day out, he's just working on new projects and doing all kinds of design work and managing the social media streams. And then we have a photographer that we use. So it's basically the three of us that kind of sit down and come up with ideas and ways to promote and market things.
Yeah, as a fairly nascent company, I mean, what is it, 5 years? 5, yeah. 5 years, yeah. So, I mean, you're still obviously focused, business first and product first, like you said.
Yeah.
Has it been difficult to find time to do the marketing? How much have you focused on it?
To be honest, we don't do a whole lot of marketing outside of focusing on our labels and our brand and our packaging and our social media. We don't advertise. We don't have any other marketing programs or initiatives in the works right now because we can barely keep up to demand. So we've been fortunate that way, that we sell every ounce we make every week, and we run out of beer all the time, even though we've been growing and constantly adding more equipment to make more beer. We're just constantly trying to respond to the local demand, and so we're lucky that way. We don't have a big marketing budget. Pretty much all of that budget goes into packaging and design and festivals. So that's the other big thing that we do for marketing, and we get involved in all of the different beer festivals that are going on, and we do all kinds of charity events and those kinds of things. But traditional marketing, we don't do a whole lot of that. So, yeah.
Where does most of the demand come from for you guys?
Well, we distribute all over BC now, a little bit in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and that's really only because they've been asking for it. We can barely keep up to demand locally, and we know that we could sell more in BC. But I would say 60% of our sales are probably in Vancouver, Greater Vancouver, 10 to 15 in the interior, and the rest of BC, 10 or so on the island, and then spread out a little bit elsewhere. But most of the demand comes from the people that are really in the know about craft beer, and they speak to their friends about it, and it's recommended by a friend, or at a party they see it or whatever, and they see it in the liquor store or on tap or on a menu at a restaurant, and that's been great exposure for us. We've been lucky enough to just have an explosion of accounts come on board and want to carry our product.
So the people who are really into it, we can call them experts. There's lots of experts in the food industry. There's lots of experts in the beer industry.
Yeah.
How much weight does the opinion of one of those experts carry for you guys? Like, when they talk about you in the media or on their blogs or Instagram pages, do you find that has a big impact for you?
It can. It depends on what their reach is, But it does for sure, in the sense that I guess one story is that when we first opened up, we had been doing social media a little bit, but we had our heads down building a brewery. And we didn't really get too involved in getting the word out there yet. So when we first opened our doors, it was June 1st, 2013, we opened up and we were like, okay, a bunch of people are going to come through and try our beer. But we had over 400 people come that day, a brand new brewery. But it's because there's such...
it's like a groundswell, right?
Yeah, there's such excitement around new breweries, and it's kind of just an on-trend kind of industry, that the word of mouth from those, getting back to your question, the word of mouth from those people in the know was super important at the beginning, and I believe still is. They still have an impact, absolutely. Yeah.
So your talk here was the power of a visual story, right? At CMC. Maybe talk a little bit about what the point behind that is, and when we talk about growing the business, do you see sort of, maybe it's a two-part question, do you see expansion business-wise coming with more efforts on the marketing side?
Yeah. Well, my talk was, I come into this marketing conference as not an expert in digital marketing at all, but I wanted to tell my story from my perspective, and what I've done for the company is essentially create a visual story. And so I've woven in the visuals and wanted to make sure our aesthetic was really on point and would be timeless and classic. And so my thought was I would display that here and kind of outline how I went about doing that. And then I wanted to kind of get into sort of inspiration to where we're going and why we're doing it and where we see ourselves in a few years and that kind of thing. So in terms of growth and where we see marketing coming into play, I think that once we get to the end of my talk, by the way, was a point I was making is that we're going to be building a new brewery. We're outgrowing our current space, and that's going to be much bigger than our current space. We'll be able to produce about 5 or 6 times the volume that we're doing now. And at that point in time, I think, which is going to be in 2 years, I believe marketing is going to become a much bigger role in our company. So I think we're going to grow the team a little bit. We're going to have much more focus and emphasis on reaching consumer, and it's going to become a whole nother task and a whole beast in itself, I think. So we take it one step at a time, and thankfully we can grow incrementally, and you don't just scale up to 5 times the size overnight. And so we'll get there, but marketing will inevitably become a way bigger part of our business in a few years' time.
Yeah, you used the word relatability, and then you played a video that was produced by agency, and I assume it's going to be part of your marketing efforts moving forward. Maybe talk a little bit about why it was important for you to make that video, what you hope it accomplishes, and how that video plays on the theme of relatability.
Sure. Yeah, no, the video came about because I wanted a way to kind of launch the announcement that we're going to be building a new brewery. And I wanted it to be like an impactful way and kind of an abstract way too. Like, I didn't want it to be the typical kind of interview video with shots of the brewing process and all that. I wanted it to be more landscapes and more suggestive. And so we came up with the idea that we're the Four Winds, and the 4 main people in this business. We kind of highlighted each of us in the video kind of coming together for a final dinner party together, celebrating this new venture. And then what I hope is that the ending will show people what the whole first 2 minutes was about, because it's important to get to the end where it says Four Winds is building a new home. But I wanted to use that video to launch basically, the news or the announcement that we're opening a new brewery, and we haven't done that yet. It's not even really public knowledge. There's rumors about it, but we're working on some permitting things with Delta, and we're getting through the final steps of that. But pretty soon we're going to start building this brewery, and it's going to be pretty incredible. It's going to be a lot larger than we are now, and it's going to be something that you won't find anywhere else in the Lower Mainland.
And maybe lastly, or one of the last questions here, you talked about people leaving social networks. And you talk about also needing to do more marketing. So is there kind of a little disconnect there, or maybe even fear from your side where the connection to people is changing and you don't really know how
I don't know how it's going to play out. There's uncertainty there. I'm not really all that worried about it, but there is uncertainty. I know social media is here to stay, but where it goes is, I don't know, you know what I mean? And so we have to kind of keep our thumb on the pulse of that and try to figure out how to navigate it. But I just, from my experience, you probably see it too. I get friends that leave this or that because they're sick of it, or you're getting overwhelmed, or you feel overstimulated or anxious about it. You're always on there, and so we have to combat that a little bit with being creative and thinking of other ways to connect to people, I think.
Right. So why don't you finish by telling our listeners and our audience What's the most popular beer you've got right now, and then where people can find you guys?
Okay. Well, our most popular beer has always been our IPA, our standard IPA. That's in a 4-pack of bottles. You can find it at pretty much any government liquor store throughout BC, as well as all the private liquor stores. That's generally, it's an amazing IPA, but generally IPAs are the most popular craft beer style. They're not for everybody, but the second most popular and maybe our most famous beer is called Nectarous. Nectarous is a dry hop sour beer, so it's really tart, light-bodied, effervescent, tropical fruit notes, and really easy drinking. People that don't even like beer tend to like this beer. It happened to win Canadian Beer of the Year in 2016 at the Canadian Brewing Awards. And that one you can find also at most of the government liquor stores, a lot of the private liquor stores. So we've got about 10 or 11 full-time beers that are on the market at all times. You can find us at pretty much any liquor store in BC. Just ask for Four Winds. We're also at a million different restaurants and bars. So we're easily found.
And when you talk about product being, the first focus, when you do focus, so much and do it well, when win awards, that acts as your marketing, right?
Yeah, it's been huge for us.
Really
And the year before that, we won Brewery of the Year in 2015 in Canada. So that was massive for us. We didn't expect it at all. And so from there, we just trying to keep doing what we're doing and trying to constantly improve and figure out ways to get to the next step.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, take care.